Hey, what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today we're doing the what's next on Sergey Derevyanchenko, the former three-time world title challenger, following his unanimous decision loss over 10 rounds to Christian Mbilli when they fought in a super middleweight contest that headlined an ESPN card that took place on August 17th. Now, before we get into that, if you could smash the like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I continue to build my channel here. So this fight, Sergey went in the underdog. He fought his ass off. It's tough to knock Derevyanchenko when he injured his bicep. And it's tough to determine how the fight would have went if he didn't get hurt. But hey, injuries happen. I personally feel like it would have been a more competitive fight because Derevyanchenko was landing good punches. But honestly, I just don't think the pace that Mbilli set, Derevyanchenko would have been able to fully keep up. I think he would have been outworked. And I think Derevyanchenko would have lost the fight anyways. But it would have been closer, in my opinion. But be that as it may, Derevyanchenko showed that he's a tough motherfucker to knock out and that he's still got something in the tank. Now, it'd be real easy to say that retirement is something he should contemplate, and maybe he should. He's at 37, 38 now. He's got nothing left to prove, and I don't think the reality in anybody's mind is that he's going to be a legitimate world title contender moving forward. But I do look at him as, like, especially with the division kind of turning over soon, you got Benavidez and Morrell and Canelo, and I even think Caleb Plant's going to end up moving up to 175 light heavyweight. Or Canelo's just going to be looking for those big kind of legacy fights like Terrence Crawford. I think with all that, I think it's a good chance that Derevyanchenko could stay here and be competitive and maybe even pull off an upset to be a world champion, or at least put himself right in line, because look at how he's done against good-ass fighters that are projected to be the future, like Munguia and Mbilli. He showed a ton in those fights of heart and competition, and I just think he kind of exposes these guys as good, but hey, I'm still around. I'm still legitimate. So with all that being said, the big question is what's next for Sergey Derevyanchenko. Let's run through the top 10. We start with Canelo. That fight's not going to happen. Canelo is either going to take legacy fights at 168 or he's moving up to 175 after Berlanga. I don't see him entertaining a Derevyanchenko fight. Derevyanchenko hasn't earned that at all. Then you got David Benavidez. He's not coming back down to 168 unless it's for Canelo, so that one's not on the table. Then there's Jaime Munguia in a rematch. Be great to see a rematch between the two, but Derevyanchenko would have to earn that in some capacity, because now that Munguia is a bigger name, knocking out John Ryder, getting in the ring with Canelo, and now that Derevyanchenko lost to Mbilli, there's not going to be a demand or a call for that. So I don't see Derevyanchenko and Munguia happening next. Then you got Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant's returning on September 14th on the Canelo undercard. I think after he's done there, he's going to make a full move to 175. There's not a lot of big fights at 168 that are easy to make anyways for Plant. He's more on that veteran range, and I think he's probably going to chase up the Benavidez's, Morrell's, and Canelo's up to 175 to seek bigger fights. That's what I believe. Then there's David Morrell. David Morrell made his debut at 175. All the bigger names are there now. I think Morrell's staying at 175. I don't think he's going to fight at 168. I mean, maybe he could come down and give a guy like Derevyanchenko an opportunity, but I really think for Morrell it would be considered kind of a step back with a guy like Sergey having back-to-back losses. So I don't see these two guys getting together. Then a rematch with Christian Mbilli. There's really no need for it right now. Even though Derevyanchenko injured his bicep, there hasn't been any kind of significant talk about a rematch, so I don't see a rematch being a possibility. Then there's Demetrius Andrade. I mean, I think Sergey would be open to a fight like this at any point with Boo Boo, but we don't know what the fuck Boo Boo's going to do. There's talk about him moving to 160. There's been talk about him coming back, and neither has ever happened since the loss to Benavidez last year. And Boo Boo was a guy that didn't fight a lot prior to that. And I just don't know if a fight with him and Derevyanchenko would be possible. Maybe sometime next year, but who the fuck knows? So I'm going to say no to that one. Edgar Berlanga, if Berlanga wins or loses, if he beats Canelo, Derevyanchenko wouldn't be on his radar. If he loses to Canelo, possibly, but not next. I think the way most people think he's going to lose to Canelo is by knockout. If he gets embarrassed or beat up against Canelo, he's making a big payday. He's probably going to take some significant time off, and I don't think he'd want to come back against a guy like Sergey who can still bang with the best of them. So I don't see that. Then Shane Mosley Jr. This one's interesting. If Mosley wants to continue to improve his name and Derevyanchenko wants to get bigger name opponents, I think both of these guys check the boxes. I think this one could be a possibility for both guys because Mosley's coming off a win over Danny Jacobs. He might say, hey, you know, I want to continue to make noise at 168. Now, I personally think Mosley moves back down to 160, but he is a free agent now. He can pretty much do whatever he wants, and I think it's a possibility he stays at 168, and I think Derevyanchenko would be a good opponent for him. So we'll see. I do think there's a possibility there. The guys outside of the top 10 that are highly ranked, William Skull. Skull's fighting Vladimir Shishkin next for the vacant IBF title. After that, it's up in the air on what the winner decides to do. I think Skull would be a good option because, Derevyanchenko would be a good option as your first title defense to make a name for yourself. So I do think that's a possibility, but we got to wait to see how Skull and Derevyanchenko and Shishkin shake out. But again, I do think a possibility of them fighting Derevyanchenko is very real. Then you got Diego Pacheco. Pacheco is interesting. He's actually fighting tonight, projected to win over Maciej Sulecki. After that, the options are kind of up there based on what Canelo does with the WBO title. If Canelo gives it up, Pacheco could be fighting for the vacant belt in his next fight because he's a #1 contender. But I really do think Pacheco is trying to increase his resume, could take on a guy like Derevyanchenko even in his first title defense, and we don't know. So I do think there's a possibility of this, but it really depends on what happens with the WBO belt because I don't think Derevyanchenko will be lined up for the vacant title because he's not highly rated. But if Pacheco wins and Derevyanchenko still hasn't come back, if Pacheco were to win the world title, maybe, but a lot of things got to fall into the right places for that to be a possibility. So for now, I think it's a possibility more if Pacheco doesn't fight for the WBO title next, if that makes sense, because he'll continue to try to increase his resume, so we'll see. Vladimir Shishkin, as I said, the winner of him and William Skull, the options are wide open, and I think a guy like Derevyanchenko would make sense as a first title defense to really make a name for yourself in the division. Eric Bazinian's, I think if Bazinian upsets Jaime Munguia, he's going to get Christian Mbilli next. If he loses to Jaime Munguia, you never know. I guess a fight with him and Derevyanchenko could happen, but it depends on how he loses to Munguia on September 20th. If he loses a close fight, if he bangs it out in there, I definitely think a fight with him and Derevyanchenko could be in the future because he's kind of the consummate gatekeeper at 168. And then finally, a highly rated guy in the WBA, Lester Martinez. Don't really know much about him, but you never know. But I think Derevyanchenko more goes after bigger name guys or bigger name options. So for Derevyanchenko, the most likely guy in the top 10 that I think would be a possibility, I honestly think Shane Mosley Jr. Is a highly rated guy on there. I think Diego Pacheco. I think the winner of William Skull and Vladimir Shishkin for the IBF title could be possibilities. You just don't know, especially with Derevyanchenko coming off an injury here. He's going to be out for a bit coming off an injury. What does he decide to do in the new year? That's all up in the air. We got to wait to see what happens. But I like Derevyanchenko. I hope he comes back and that's it. That's my what's next on Sergey Derevyanchenko, the former 3-time world title challenger. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.